Oh, I found it. It's a button.
So whenever
And as it pertains to working in Indian country, of course, that's our main goal. I'm Deborah Adams, and I am the program coordinator for Women's Spirit. And to my left in the picture with me is Peg Kane. Peg, would you
Hi.
like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Peg Kane. I'm a domestic violence treatment provider in Thurston County, actually in Olympia. Been doing this for about almost 30 years. Even before we had DV, it was anger control when I first started out. Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. Dee, are you going to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dee Coaster. I'm Executive Director for Women's Spirit Coalition. We've been working with this topic matter for many years, and Indian country is catching up. And so we thought it would be timely and um, informative to bring this topic to our members and interested allies. So I'm happy to be a part of the conversation.
Okay. Well, to get us started, we're going to talk a little bit more about Peg. She mentioned she's been doing the work for almost 30 years, but we also would like you to have the information if you ever wanted to contact her on your own. And so this is her address and her phone number, her email address, and her website. So Peg is a really good resource to us. We kind of wanted to talk about some of the facts of Batterers treatment, and a little research showed us that we've had Batterer intervention programs since the mid 1990s. And it was really a, a topic of interest because around that time we also had mandatory arrest coming into play, and that increased the arrest and prosecution of batterers, which increased the demand for treatment or rehabilitation.
Well, our state law, it's a mandatory arrest law as well as a mandatory no bail law, too,
Right.
which means if a person's arrested for domestic violence charge, then they cannot post bail until they stand in front of a judge.
Right. So we found that it was 1991 that it was passed. Peg has shared with me that it was took until 1993 for it to be implemented.
Right.
So that's quite a while ago in our history, and there's an RCW on the screen with the website. Now, I would be happy to email you this PowerPoint after our webinar if you'd like, so that you don't have to worry about writing down too much stuff unless you want to. Right, Ophi? So in 1993, they developed the Washington Administrative Code, which really tells you how to do your work. Is that correct,
That's
Peg?
true. That's true. The
So,
WAC.
and what happens to you as a provider if you don't follow those?
Well, number one, they don't certify individuals in the state of Washington, they certify programs. You have to meet certain criteria in order to work in a program. But if your program's not certified, you cannot do the work. You can do the work, the court just won't accept it.
There you go. So it's important to know all these things so that we can get the right responses and
Right.
interventions we need. I'd also like to let you know that if you'd like to type a question in your, feel free to do that and we'll try to get it answered for you. So these batterers intervention programs were designed to work in conjunction with the criminal justice system. And because the number one thing that batterers intervention programs try to do is ensure accountability
And safety for the victim.
and safety for the victims, accountability to have the perpetrator admit and work on his violence issues,
His
right?
power and control issues.
Power and control.
And we're saying him when in reality we do have some female offenders coming to treatment. We do 10 groups in our agency right now, 8 of which are men's groups and 2 are female groups. The issues that we address in the male groups versus what we address in the female groups are very different. Groups must be gender specific.
And what you're talking about, Peg, is these are state certified programs, and this is not necessarily the case for tribal programs at this point. So,
Yeah, when I talk today, it'll be about what we have to do to be a state certified program. Any questions, please feel free to ask, and between the three of us, maybe we can answer them.
right. And Dee and I and Alma, everybody here at Women's Spirit's been doing the work a long time too. And so this third point is that has been a lot of controversy about Batterers programs. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, there's been controversy over whether or not they're effective, or even offering it as an intervention is a good thing to do. I guess as far as offering it is concerned, it would be like saying we have a problem, but let's not do anything about it because we don't know whether it's going to work or not. So I happen to believe it does work. We have really good statistics on when it doesn't work because it usually ends up in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the success that we have, we're only being able to start gathering statistics on that now. So hopefully we will have some statistics down the line that show, factually, in a way people can read. When in reality, I know as a provider that I have had people that I saw in treatment 20 years ago
Mm-hmm.
that I will receive a letter, a card, or they will even stop by the office and they will talk about what a difference it made in their lives. So maybe it's not 100%, but I do know it works for some.
Yeah. And in the state of Washington, is there a law or a practice through the courts in the cities and the counties in their courts to, uh, like this says, use intervention as a sentencing option? So is there a standard where anybody convicted of domestic violence gets?
Well, they don't even have to be convicted.
Okay.
Many times they take a plea. They're either deferred, or they take a step in continuance, or they go through diversion, or they have probation, where if they comply with the alternative, which is to do batterers treatment, then if they're successful, then it's dismissed off of their record, which can have a real impact on a person's ability to find housing, to have a job, to maintain their job. Because if you have a domestic violence conviction and you work with, um, say, you work in a hospital, you could lose your job. If you're training to work in a hospital, you won't be able to get a job in the state of Washington. So it has, far-reaching ramifications.
Okay. So over the years before Washington State had the state certified program for batterers intervention, there was these four different types of approaches to trying to rehabilitate or whatever for
Right.
our batterers. And the first one, and still to this day, it's used
Right,
anger
the term
management.
is, but it's
Yes,
erroneous.
right. And we don't like that, do we?
No. For me, and what I say to the people that I work with, is anger management is usually done with a stranger. It's somebody you don't have an ongoing relationship with. That's one of the primary differences between domestic violence and anger management. Is you know the person.
Mhm.
Usually it's an intimate relationship, or you have some type of relationship going on, whether it be parental, child, whatever. And so there is such a history already there.
Mhm.
Anger management, somebody meet in a bar and you get in a fight because you're drunk, and or you're in an accident and somebody hits your brand new Porsche
Mhm.
and you smack them. That's anger management.
And that's when it's appropriate,
right.
more like. So treatment is, we've been talking about state certified treatment programs. So tell us a little bit more about the treatment aspect, if you would.
Okay, one of the things that we're putting up on the screen is going to be the WAC
Mm-hmm.
388.6. Has a lot of information that not only tells us what needs to happen in the batterers treatment program, but also what we have to do in order to be treatment providers, state certified treatment providers. So, you can look it up, and you may want to go through, and you may have more questions. You can go through, and it shows about confidentiality, what we have to do, what treatment staff qualifications are, recertification, because we have to do that every 2 years through DSHS. Um, if you have a complaint about a provider, what your options are, how they're investigated, and what the results are, and then notification. So it's a pretty comprehensive amount of information. But the ones that we kind of zone in on is the part about confidentiality, what we're going to do with victims, and what our actual treatment program has to look like.
Yeah.
Because we don't have an awful lot of control of the other stuff. That's
So
kind of outside of us.
would you be willing to describe some of the types of treatment practices that you use in your groups?
Okay. State law says you can't have more than 12 people in a group.
Okay.
They have to be gender specific.
Okay.
I prefer to only have 10 max, and I always work with a male co-therapist because I believe that having a man and a woman in a group is, as counselors, is a real good way to model appropriate behaviors, for one thing. To be able to see a man be gentle and see a woman be strong. So there's a lot of modeling that goes on. Also, I think in men's groups, men initially react a little more to a man than they do to a woman.
Okay.
They usually relate to each other in the group better before they relate to the male therapist or the female therapist. This is just experientially what I've seen. So the modeling is important. Before they even get to the actual group, though, they sign a contract. I think our contract's like 10 pages long because we spell out everything and what the rules are and what the protocols are. Because the other thing the law says, it has to be fair to everyone, and it has to be very clearly defined how things happen. Like we don't allow our clients to drink or use alcohol or drugs unless they're prescribed by a physician while they're in treatment. That doesn't mean just the day they're in treatment, but all the time, because we want to talk to the drug.
Yeah.
That's just an example. It's really important in group for everybody to feel respected, because by the time people show up in our groups, they've been through the system, they haven't felt heard, they have felt maligned by the system. It's cost them a lot of money, and it's going to cost them more doing treatment. And so we're really the first people that are willing to listen to them. And so there's that initial part where we're just letting them tell their story. Excuse me. And then we start doing what we do in group as far as, explaining the importance of not only should they be treated respectfully, but the people in their lives be treated respectfully.
Right.
And what I hear over and over again in treatment is most of the people that come into treatment believe domestic violence is only when you hit people. Slapping doesn't qualify as hitting. That's slapping, that's not hitting. So part of it is education about what domestic violence actually is, whether it be psychological, emotional, verbal, sexual, whatever. Right. And being able to define that for our clients. Some programs do a lot of psychoeducational stuff as far as movies and films and stuff. Our groups are 2 hours long, and we've never had time to play a movie.
Okay. So in the treatment, though, do you use some modalities of treatment? What might those be?
Some programs use MRT, which is moral recognition therapy. We use cognitive behavioral based on, oh gosh, I just lost his name, where it's the ABC theory, Albert Ellis, where there's an activating event. What you believe about it determines what you do about it. So cognitive behavioral, but that's the basis. But as a clinician, we use a lot of different things in regards to the different theories of psychological treatment. So you have to be diverse because each one of your clients is different.
Right.
And many times attorneys will say, well, yeah, it's cookie cutter therapy. Everybody gets the same thing. Well, to some degree they do. There are certain things they have to do in order to be compliant with the law. But actually, the treatment plans we come up with are pretty individual.
Right. So I think this slide is talking about re-education, but it sounds to me like your groups include that re-education
Right,
piece. So it's
right,
both like mental health therapy
right.
practices, including
Well,
re-education.
we do an assessment initially before they ever get into group.
Mhm.
And one of the things that the law also tells us we have to look at are there mental health issues? Are there substance abuse issues? Are there um, neurological problems? We're scanning for a lot of different things. That doesn't make us an authority in it.
Mhm.
But if we have any indicators that that might be something the client needs to deal with, like we're seeing a lot of soldiers coming back that have traumatic brain injury, that have PTSD.
Mhm.
Well, you know, we can be helpful with that, but that's not the treatment they probably need more of
Mhm.
in conjoint with whatever they're doing in their Batterers treatment.
Right. Right.
And Peg, what about chemical dependency?
Well, I'm not a chemical dependency counselor. I've taken all the classes, so I kind of have a feel for it, but I'm not ready to hang my shingle out. So if I think somebody has that going on, I'm going to write a recommendation for them to have an eval.
Would you recommend they do them simultaneously,
It
or?
really depends on the individual. If we have somebody that is so addicted that they're not able to get through the day, we probably want them to go and do treatment first.
Okay.
Because again, we want to talk to the person, we don't want to talk to the drug.
Right. Right. So let's talk about that fourth approach to batterers rehabilitation or programming, mediation. Do you have an opinion on that?
Oh, do I ever? Mediation. This is a person's individual problem. If you are acting out violently with somebody, it is not about the other party. It is about what your choices are. A lot of people, you know, I go to court quite a bit, and there'll be a psychologist that wants to run me through the mill because I haven't run the right testing and everything. Well, DV is not a psychological problem. It is a learned behavior and it is a choice about power and control. And so it's an individual thing. If you
Mhm.
take care of yourself, some of these other problems are going to kind of evaporate when you're
Right.
taking charge of you.
Well, and I know you've talked about batterers need to recognize their use of power over other people. And so, how does that work in mediation?
Well, I don't think does. And I think they need to complete treatment. And then
Mhm.
if for whatever reason the other party wants to reconcile, then there needs to be some way where they can talk about the things that happened.
Yeah. So mediation is really for people who have this
A
sense of
mutual issue.
a mutual issue. They both play a role, and
Right,
it's acknowledged. It's they are equal with power and status
right,
as well. Not
right.
not so much what domestic violence
Mhm.
creates. Quite the opposite. And we just want to point out that many states have these standards.
Yes.
They all vary, though, right?
Oh,
In
very
Washington
different.
State, our program is a year long. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
It's a minimum of 1 year,
Okay.
and the state mandates that the first 26 sessions need to be on a weekly basis. After that, the agency has some discretion. Uh, we have certain assignments that a client has to complete before we'll allow them to go at the end of that 6 months to then every other treatment. And then after 3 months of that, 3 months of once a month. The state says we can go right to once a month, but we have found that when people have been in a program and it's been pretty rigid about what they have to do, because we bird dog them on what they have to do, because that's about accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to just drop them from weekly to monthlies, I think is pretty abrupt, and there's a greater probability of reoffense.
Mm-hmm.
So we have gone to every other week for 3 months. I have other clients at the end of a year, they're not even close to going to every other month. For whatever reason, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Their attendance is terrible. We've done, rounders about whether or not they're going to be suspended. I've had clients up to 3 years.
Right. So, what we want to point out is that in tribes, as sovereign nations, they have their own laws
Yes.
and codes. And so, as it stands right now, they're not required to adopt Washington state
No, no.
standards. but it's highly recommended. And on the screen, it shows a couple reasons why they might want to do so. It could increase your eligibility for funding from the feds and or referrals from other jurisdictions.
Right.
And so that's something to take into consideration. And one thing that I think is important, and I'm pretty sure that our audience would be interested in this, is how involved in this are the survivors, the victims, in your treatment process with your.
It's very interesting. Some survivors don't want any information. They don't want any contact. They want nothing to do with the other party. Others are hopeful that there'll be changes and maybe they'll reconcile. It's important for us whenever there is a change of status for who we are working with in our Batterer program that we notify the other party. It's part of the state law. I also believe it's very, very important at the get-go to interview the victim, not because I'm going to confide that information to the batterer, but it's been my experience that most people don't out themselves real quickly or very definitely.
Yeah, or it could take a long time.
Right, yes, yes. So it's helpful to know what the experience is, and then there's questions we can ask without involving the other party, and many times they will tell us then.
And share with us your confidentiality around this information.
Okay, anything that the victim or the survivor, which is the PC way of referring to it, for now, let's just say victim perpetrator, just for expediency. The records between the perpetrator and the victim are kept separate. They're not even kept in the same room. Under the perpetrators, their files are by name. The victims are done by number. So in case, God help us, anybody would break in and try and steal a file, they wouldn't be able to put the two together.
Right.
Yes, victim safety, victim confidentiality is a priority. If a victim wants us to address an issue with the perpetrator, they have to ask us in a written request, and then we will only ask.
Yeah. So I used to be an advocate for victims, and one woman in particular I was working with came to me and said that her spouse was required by his treatment provider to have her write a letter, and he was actually using that to manipulate her, of course, and making it all about her by saying, if you don't do it, I'm going to be in trouble, and if you don't say this and that, then it's not going to work. So what is your thoughts on that process?
When we initially interview somebody who is a victim in a case, number one, we tell them if we're not in any way asking if they want it lifted, but if down the line they should want to lift it, we send them a packet of information, and in it it says there has to be a written request, and we also need a safety plan for them. So, and then many times they'll call us later and maybe they got the packet, they didn't get the packet, they lost the packet, whatever, and we'll go over that. In our office, we have a special victim advocate designated to help out with that.
Nice. That's great.
Peg, what does the term drive-through therapy mean to you?
Oh, you just show up, give me your money, and you're out the door.
And you don't believe in that, do you?
No.
Which is why we selected Peg for our expert.
I think it's a gross injustice because people are coming to you in good faith. They have hope that there'll be changes made. Perhaps they do want to reconcile. There's children involved. There's multiple reasons why I think drive-by therapy is just a rip.
Yeah, and it's not productive, right?
No.
So we have a screen on a slide on the screen that talks about what is good intervention, and we can kind of go through these, and or if these. So you see violence as a problem, not a symptom,
right?
So what does that mean to you?
Well, it's the individual's problem. Whatever their behavior is and the choices they're making, that is just it. That is their choice. That is what they are doing. It's not a symptom of what another party is doing. So you can't make me say or do anything, and I can't make you say or do anything.
Right.
They have to get very, very clear on what their power is and what their power is not. Power over is not the same thing as power, by the way.
Right.
Usually a person who has to power over feels pretty powerless.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right. And I think we kind of talked about your initial assessment,
mhm.
and that you have the right to decline services to an individual,
Yes.
and that you do screen for multiple things besides the need for batterers
Right.
for rehabilitation. And we've talked about the coexistence of substance abuse.
Mhm.
Um, so,
One of the things we require too on our release of information is when we write up the recommendations, if we're recommending that a person have a CD assessment, then we ought and to execute all releases so that the providers can communicate among themselves.
okay,
So,
that's good to know.
mhm.
It's good to know. And if anybody listening has a question, feel free to type it and we'll get the expert to answer it for you. So, these are kind of just some basic things that I think most people who have a basic understanding of domestic violence would see as a need for any
Mhm.
kind of
Well, like in
rehabilitation.
there, it says the belief system changes. That kind of goes along with what I was talking about in regarding to the ABC theory
Yes.
of Ellis's, because what you believe about something determines how you feel about it.
Yeah.
So,
So this one is a clear intervention contracts outlining programs expectations, and you talked about that, but you said something else that kind of went beyond that about the community. Do you want to expound on that?
right. It is so important that when somebody is in treatment with us, we are very, very clear with them, and they have to be very, very clear that what the expectations are about what their behaviors will be,
Mm-hmm.
and that if they choose not to do that, what sanctions there are. You have to have the community support in order to make that part work
Mm-hmm.
because they're real skivvy to what's going to happen to me
Mm-hmm.
if I do or I don't do this. So knowing that the court is going to do this, the prosecutor will do this, the jail will do this, the police will do this. you know uh, if your children might be you might see them supervised instead of unsupervised. you know so we can be clear with our clients and say, this is very serious stuff. This isn't a joke. This is very serious. And these are the things that can happen. If you violate a restraining
Yeah.
order, I can tell my clients, I can guarantee if you violate, when you get caught, this is what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
You will see a judge and you may do some jail
Yeah.
time.
So it's not about you or your business holding someone accountable. It's about all the systems of the
Are on board.
that are on board, and that you kind of provide that protective circle around the victim
Right.
and hold the abuser accountable. I think that's really important too.
And I think most human beings are creatures of habit. We do the same thing over and over again, then wonder how come it keeps turning out badly.
Mm-hmm.
I think people usually change when they get real uncomfortable. And the people in treatment usually get very uncomfortable. We're not hitting them or anything like that.
Right.
But the way they've done business before, all of a sudden, is not working.
Right.
And that's one of the things that makes treatment effective.
Awesome.
There has to be a incentive to change.
Right.
And sometimes a very strong personal motivation, right? And maybe that's what's going to get that strong personal
Right.
motivation
Right.
is when they know there's a group of people that are watching them and keeping tabs
Mm-hmm.
and what.
And,
Yeah.
and the way groups are constructed, you may be in a group of, say, 8 to 10 people, and there's a couple of people that are very close to completing treatment, and then there's somebody that's just starting and everything in between. So the groups are incredibly powerful. We don't actually run the groups, we lead them
Mm-hmm.
because the groups become very, very powerful as the people in the group start feeling more powerful themselves. Each human being has an incredible amount of power that, for whatever reason, they choose to give to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the person that ends up feeling very powerless. So it's very important to be able to empower our people too.
Yeah. So on this slide, tell us about the training that you undergo to become a state certified provider.
Well, you must have 30 hours of domestic violence perpetrator treatment education. You must have 30 hours of victim information from a victim program. then you're required to have 250 hours of actual working with perpetrators and with victims.
So some supervised practice.
Very much so.
Okay.
I don't know, tell me I've got power and control issues, but if somebody's going to work in my program, I want them working with us for about a year before they actually do groups by themselves.
And you do that, you supervise other
Yeah.
people, and they don't get paid while they do that, right?
Depends.
Sometimes it's
Yeah, if we have somebody working in our program and we see that they're cut out to be a good DV therapist, yeah, we'll pay them while they do that.
That's nice.
But we do a lot of interns too, and they're not going to be there long enough to really get everything that I feel my program needs.
Right. And then this last bullet point talks about you must have references from a local domestic violence service agency.
Right. Here in town is a safe place. We have a task force. If you have a task force, it's helpful to have a recommendation from them. There's 3 providers in Olympia, and I usually write letters for them and they write letters for us. We also have a perpetrator providers meeting once a month too, so we can kind of figure out, what do we need to do next. We spend a lot of time working with the courts. We just developed a new report form that will be used in both Superior Criminal Court and in Family Law Court, because we felt it was very important that there was more narrative to really explain to the judge what was going on with our client as far as what they were learning or what we still saw as difficulties for them. Excuse me, allergies. But and the courts have just been real willing. They give us information about what they need. We've been able to talk with them, so it's been a great experience.
So again, that really, well, sorry, do go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in a tribal community, this part of the certification could come from a tribal domestic violence and sexual assault program, or also if you have a tribal coalition that operates in your area. Those are 2 other ways that tribes could have collateral support.
I think if
for their program,
the tribal programs, located a program where they could get the 30 hours for each, and then come back and figure out how they could employ that within the tribe, I think it would be really helpful. I think the 30 hours for the victim and the perpetrator training is really, really important because it covers so much of what we deal with on a daily basis.
So these are some kind of specific to our communities, which are Native American or Indian communities. And so we think the programming, such as you said, your cognitive-based theory and the re-education piece might need to include include the circle of life, and talk about the disconnect in the 21st century for non-tribal communities, the disconnect between environment and the balance of life. And, again,
actually, I could add a little something there too, because we have had tribal members in our treatment groups before. And I believe that anybody that comes in treatment, if they have a different ethnic background, religious background, whatever, that it can be a great place to educate people, because we've had Muslims, we've had some really unorthodox things, and it's enlightening. And part of what we try to teach is acceptance for human beings, period.
Right.
So,
okay.
So you would probably be teaching us if you came to us.
Well, so these were some things that we thought were really pertinent to tribal communities, based on, their lived experience of oppression and historical oppression and all the things that have happened to natives over the years here in the United States. So what do you think about, towards the bottom of the list, the high rates of recidivism is to be expected?
Well, I would say rates of recidivism should be expected, as they expect that in drug and alcohol programs.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't like the high part.
But it should be expected.
It
It's
should be
not kind
accepted,
of
yeah.
this is not a program that would say you learn it once and you're done.
No, because you're dealing
And
with
you're cured.
things. And people make choices, and really good people sometimes make really bad choices.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it is really, when people leave, we don't give them a graduation certificate. We give them a thing that is actually kind of doing away with our liability in regards to this person by saying that if they use the skills that they have demonstrated that they do know, the probability of reoffense is much lowered. But when people leave, if they don't keep using the skills they've learned,
Right.
it's really easy to go back to the old stuff because you've done it for so long.
Absolutely.
You must continue to practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Peg, what are the percentage rates for people who complete treatment?
Well, they always talk about sociopaths and psychopaths. They don't usually last more than a month because it's just too structured. So that
Hmm.
gets eliminated fairly quickly. We have
Mhm.
some people that choose to go to jail rather than complete treatment. And then we
Right.
have other people that, for whatever reason, it takes them longer. But I
Mhm.
would say if out of a group of 10, I'd say at least 90% make it through.
That's pretty high.
Yeah, well, that's our groups. I don't know about other
That's
people's.
amazing
Yeah.
because in where I used to work, and we worked really closely with our treatment providers, they would say maybe 11%
Really?
would complete the year-long process, right?
Well, my son calls me the last bastion of lost causes too, so I work real hard.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I think those statistics probably are not the average
yeah.
statistics.
One of the things that I see though in the work that we do is the other group members become just as invested in one another as we are invested in them.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that makes a difference. And one of the
Yeah.
reasons they continue to come back. Maybe not on a weekly basis, but they do come back.
Yeah, I can certainly see that the longer they would be involved with working with your business, that it's going to be more helpful to them because even
Mm.
though they say it takes 21 days to change a habit, that doesn't necessarily work for me. Sometimes,
I don't think that works
Well,
for
if they can keep
domestic
me on smoke
violence
for
either.
21 days, I might
yeah.
have an easier time, but I don't know if I would stay off of
And
it.
as Dee said, especially for people involved with domestic violence, especially when we're talking about a lifetime of experience with some sort of violence.
Yeah, domestic violence is little more than a habit.
Right.
Yeah,
You got
exactly.
it. And the other thing, too, is one of the things that we end up looking at are lots of family of origin things.
Mhm.
We have had many, many men that have disclosed for the first time in their life about their own sexual abuse that even their wife doesn't know.
Mhm.
I mean, it gets to be a very safe place. And that's the reason confidentiality is so important
Yeah,
to maintain that.
yeah.
So when I write progress reports to the court, I write that they are progressing or they're not progressing and how they are progressing or not progressing. But as far as the issues they're actually addressing, it's really nobody's business.
Right, right.
So,
Because that's really mental health.
psychotherapy.
Yeah, exactly. So here on the screen are a few statistics, and really there's really not that many statistics related to the completion and or the success of,
Right.
because every state is different, number
Mhm.
one. So you don't, sometimes you're talking about apples and sometimes you're talking about oranges.
Bingo.
And if one state uses the theory that we're going to apply anger management compared to Washington State, who has this approximately year-long program, it's not going to be the same.
Well, it's a minimum of 1 year.
Yeah, yeah. So the outcome is,
Right.
really going to be different. We hope.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the guys figure out fairly early on that we like them, we don't like what they do. There is a difference. And that is what the point we're going to go for. You're a nice person, but you need to figure out how to
Mhm.
make better choices.
Right. And I think that's hard in general for us as humans to say, how do I hold you accountable and still love you?
Right.
But I think that
Well, I don't know about the love part.
the survivors of domestic violence would say to me as their advocate, I just want the violence to stop.
Yeah.
I can deal with all the other bad habits and behaviors that I have with this partner because of there's a million reasons why.
Right.
But I just want the violence to stop. But that is such a hard thing to accomplish without, like you said, the involvement of the community.
Yeah, we don't need any therapist over identification with the client going on there.
All right. You gotta have any other specific questions, Dee?
I am focused on the safety for women is a primary concern. So how does your programming address that?
Well, for one thing, like I said, we have a victim advocate that's delegated especially for that. If they call and they talk to our advocate and there's something serious going on, then they get switched from the advocate over to one of the therapists. And almost always gets staffed with me before it's over with. Um, they're free to stop in. They know when their partner is in group. We have days where we see women in the office and days that we see men. Um, you know,
And those are separated.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, one of our audience members, Angel, posed a question: Is are there current programs that tribes are practicing?
I don't know.
You don't know, and so,
Yes, we have several tribes that have domestic violence programs. Um,
but for batterers,
yes.
okay,
Um, Yeah, and most tribes contract out their services with established batters treatment providers. On the lower end of that scale, we also have programs that are considering developing in-house their own um, answer to that problem, whether they're leaning on the side of re-education programs or whether they're going to contract out with established certified providers. So that's kind of the question.
Well, one of the things in domestic violence treatment programs, you have to have a supervisor. That person has to be a minimum of a master's and have a minimum of 3 years clinical supervision before you can be a supervisor. So if the tribes were interested in doing that, you wouldn't have to have a supervisor in place in the office, but somebody that they could staff cases with and
Mm-hmm.
help some of the people that are actually doing the work in the tribal areas that they're stuck.
yeah,
I think what we've heard today from Peg that would be a good model to follow is to find out in the area where the tribes and tribal programs are located, who is doing that educational piece, the 30 hours victim dynamics piece, and is it 30 hours batters?
Matters
What do you call the two areas?
the 30-hour perpetrator provider
Right.
education, and then the victim advocate uh, education, 30 hours too.
Yeah, right.
so who do
So what I've
you,
proposed to Peg in the past is if our membership is interested, Women's Spirit could sponsor one of those training sessions, and we could provide the 30 hours victim dynamic portion of that, and Peg would provide the 30-hour perpetrator treatment part of that. So if programs are interested, they can let us know and we could set that up.
that's
See, a lot of things are possible now between Skype and being able to do webinars that we couldn't do 10 years ago.
Right. Is there a value to being face to face though for that particular process? When I took the classes probably 10 years ago, we spent I think 4 days together.
Right.
at least a minimum of 4 days together, doing both parts of that. So is there a value being face to face rather than doing it via a webinar?
I think you get a lot more information because there's a lot of sidebar stuff that happens and you do a lot of linking with other resources in your community when you attend trainings. So
Hmm.
it's not just what's on the PowerPoint, it's
Right.
really the other stuff on the outside of it that's really helpful.
Yeah.
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 Um, Cheryl has this suggestion, D. Tribal perpetrators programs that meet the tribal certification criteria should be recognized by the state, as this also is based on government to government relationship. And then she says the coalition could be the certification training TA component.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for your thoughts, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl. Any other questions?
She
Okay. I don't have any other questions for you. Any last closing comments?
Well, I
Okay.
want to thank you for spending this sunny day with me.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we're really quite happy to be able to have this conversation, right, Dee? Something
Absolutely.
really
Yeah,
enjoy.
this is a conversation that comes up all the time about a lot of tribes. Most tribes don't have perpetrator treatment programs and are kind of in a quandary about how much of that they want to incorporate into traditional and customary practices and so on and so forth. So I think as we go farther into this conversation, and I think having an on-site training, we could, approach some of those customary and traditional practices that could be rolled into a model treatment provider, um, model for Indian country. So,
Right.
um, good
Uh,
initial conversation.
I do have a comment from Angel. She says, I work at the Quileute Tribe New Beginnings program as the victim advocate. And currently, what we offer is outsourcing to other treatment facilities. There isn't
Yeah.
much to offer within a 100-mile radius of her location. Hey, you live in a beautiful part of the world. That you can be thankful for, Angel.
Yeah, her folks probably go to either Forks or Port Angeles. So I think most tribes are do contract out. And it's only been within the last couple of years that actually federal funding has been loosened up to include funding for perpetrator treatment programs in tribal communities. So prior to that, it was really hard to find outside money through OVW or any other funding source that would fund those programs. So it's all a recent conversation that we're having.
Yeah. Cheryl mentions in New Mexico, the tribal DV programs fought the state's push for certification and
Hmm.
degreed counselors so that they didn't have to have them, and that proved to be good for both the state and the tribe. She says.
Yeah.
It's hard work. I know we used to have like 8 providers in the Thurston County area. We have 3 now
Mm.
because certification, you do that every 2 years.
It's a lot of
It's a
responsibility.
lot of responsibility. There's a lot of liability. And I
Mhm.
think some people just get burned out too
Mhm.
because it is intense work,
Yeah,
but it's
Yeah.
worth it.
right.
It's worth it. So,
It is worth it. Something we all recognize the need for in our communities, and like I said, the survivors themselves really want it for their partners, so that they don't have to get divorced or end those relationships.
one of the things we also offer too is if somebody's in treatment with us for DV batterers, um, the women can come to our women's group free of charge. So,
That's nice.
mhm.
It's nice.
Okay, well, if anybody has further ideas, let Deborah and I know. And Peg's a great resource. I've known her for many years, and respect her work and respect her as a person. So we're happy to share her with you, and we'll be in the planning stages moving forward.
And I will send the PowerPoint to everybody who attended. So, and we recorded this too. So maybe we'll find a way to put that on our website, Dee, so people
Sure.
could listen later.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, well, it's 2 o'clock, so I think we can say goodbye and thank everybody for joining us, and looking forward to talking to you all soon.
Yep. Enjoy the
Okay.
weather. Bye bye.